Hey there troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and something a lot of people have been asking me is Insurgency Sandstorm's playstyle. This is something I've had quite a few questions on, and I think it's probably arguably one of the biggest learning curves in the game. Insurgency Sandstorm is a very different game. It's got a format that I think a lot of people will be used to, but the formula of the game itself and the way it's designed does encourage entirely different styles of play to what you'd probably expect from a hardcore shooter. And I think this is very obvious when you actually get into the game when you first kick off. It's almost designed in a semi-Battlefield-esque way. There are some open spaces and the maps themselves are relatively urban. You feel like you can go quite far and quite wide, and that's something that I really enjoy about Insurgency Sandstorm, but it definitely doesn't correlate with how you should play the game. You almost feel inclined to play it as though it's a Battlefield-style game based on the surroundings that you have. But in actuality, you should be playing it much similarly to Rainbow Six Siege. Now, I'm not saying these games are directly comparable, but in terms of the format of gameplay and in terms of just generally traversing maps, it's actually very similar. In Rainbow Six Siege, you are absolutely punished for not checking your corners and moving through buildings accordingly, and the same thing applies here in Insurgency. If you don't check your corners, be it in an alleyway, a big street, or even as something as simple as a small room, then you will definitely die, and there's no two ways about it. Because the maps are so large, it almost feels as though that isn't the case, but in actuality, it's very much a reactionary shooter. It's one of those games where players who are intelligent and take their time to scan their surroundings and use their surroundings in a certain way are the players that will do the best, and players that don't will be punished the most. And this isn't necessarily easy. Insurgency Sandstorm is all in all a difficult game, and I think there are very few instances where you have a game that just goes perfectly and you get very minimal deaths and a crap ton of kills and you win everything. It's just the nature of the game that it's inherently difficult, and because of that you will die quite a lot and you won't necessarily always get a lot of kills, especially when heading for objectives. So if you have played Rainbow Six, I highly recommend adopting almost that kind of strategy, that kind of pacing, being slow and methodical in order to do the best in the game. This is something I've tried, it's something that I've tested quite a bit, and I genuinely do feel as though it's probably the most successful way to play the game, and I honestly highly can't recommend it enough. So what would be my top tips really? And I think this is something that a lot of people ask me in terms of playing Insurgency as new players. The first one is playing to strengths. Now, this is something that isn't inherently obvious, but guns do work at certain ranges. Now, although it feels as though, one or two bullets will kill anybody regardless of the weapon you're using, they absolutely do operate in very similar ways to sort of class balancing in Battlefield. You expect certain guns like SMGs to be much more fast-paced. I really enjoy the MK18 CQB. That thing up close and personal is quite frankly a monster. And guns that should be working at long ranges do work better at their range, and that same thing applies to your attachments. When you go into your loadout class, you really should be thinking about what you're using. A 1x optic is a great way to look around and not necessarily get tunnel vision. A 4x is good for medium engagements, but definitely does give you the tunnel vision problem. And of course, long range scopes absolutely mean you are locked to long range. You shouldn't be getting anywhere near your opponents realistically, otherwise you just simply won't have the space or time to really react to anything coming your way. The next thing for me is to play the game in a format that is a bit different, and this is something I mentioned earlier about the Rainbow Six Siege style, but I don't think you can play Insurgency like any other game. I think Insurgency is its own formula. You can't play it like Squad, you can't play it like Battlefield, you can't play it like Siege. You have to adopt a new playstyle entirely, and you can mix in elements of those games to get that right. But honestly, I'd just completely break down any preconceptions you have of first-person shooter environments in order to just do well in any given situation. Finally, and this is probably my last big tip, is that working in a squad or working as a unit definitely increases the outcomes of everything you will do. If you play with maybe one or two guys, that's all you really need. A little bit of communication on the comms can really go a long way. And the thing about it, in terms of a team effort, is that if you three are going at a methodical pace, or 4 or 5 or however many of you are conversating, what it means is that even if one of you goes down, you still win. And I think this is very telling in the co-op, and in the co-op it almost dictates that that's how it should be played in multiplayer as well. You know, if you work together in co-op, you do incredibly well, and if you work together in multiplayer, you do incredibly well. It's not one of those games that you can do necessarily easily, and although it isn't required to be in a team, I highly recommend it, or even just using the comms for a bit would actually help quite a lot. Giving people call-outs, giving people information, and working together as a unit is, quite frankly, the most satisfying way to play the game. So troops, that's about it for this video today. Let me know what you think in the comments section below if you have any ideas or thoughts on the video, and as always, thank you guys for watching.